Well, thank you very much indeed for joining me, Sián from InventoryBase Academy. We were going to have a bit of a round table discussion, but we've had to change the format literally at a moment's notice. So rather than miss the opportunity, I thought I would still carry on and record what it is that I was going to say anyway. So lifetime deposits is a subject that is being discussed at the moment, and this is all part and parcel of the Renters Reform Bill that was announced last year, 2019, and has been then reaffirmed in this year's Queen's Speech when Parliament opened on the 11th of May, if memory serves me correct. And the Renters Reform Bill has got a lot of items in it, and basically it's around abolishing the Section 21, and that's about the repossession and reform the grounds for possession. Section 21, if people aren't quite clear, is basically the form that the agents, landlords use in order to regain the property if the tenant's on an AST, and only if they've been given an EPC, a how to rent guide, and also gas safety. So they're looking to abolish that Section 21 and replace it so that basically tenants don't feel forced out of the property for no given reason. Landlords have to then give a reason as to why they need the property back and make sure that obviously the tenant's rights are protected. The Renters Reform Bill also is going to be looking to improve the court process for landlords and to make it quicker and easier for them to get their property back if they've got the grounds to do so, because obviously you can't remove Section 21 and or Section 8. Section 8 is the one that form rather that's issued if the tenant's broken their terms of the actual tenancy. But obviously, if a landlord's got a real reason to get the property back, then they should be able to. So they need to improve the actual court process to allow that. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a situation, in a way, a bit of a bottleneck that we kind of like got now with the whole issue of the eviction moratorium and the COVID issue, and also the fact that the courts haven't been operating. So we'll end up with literally a bottleneck of people not being able to move, landlords not being able to get the property back, and issues just escalating. Part and parcel of that reform bill is also about introducing a lifetime deposit. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And that's so that tenants don't need to save for deposit, especially every time they move the house. Deposit, as we all know, is inventory clerks and inventory providers, is quite an expensive item for people, especially if you've got to get a big amount of money in regards to the first deposit and then find another one in regards to the second deposit in order to be able to move. And the whole point of the lifetime deposit is to make that transition and that transaction a lot smoother. I thought it also worthwhile saying about what else the Renters Reform Bill is doing, and that is to develop and implement measures to widen access and expand the scope of the database of rogue landlords and property agents. Now, there is a database in force, though if you look at the industry, everybody's saying we're not really seeing any major change in that regard. We're not seeing any real benefits of it. So they're looking to kind of expand the scope, make it fairer, and also bring rogue landlords and agents onto that list so that people can see it and obviously use it. Part and parcel of that will also be the fact that landlords will then have to be part of a redress scheme. Now, at the moment, they are meant to be, and that was brought in, I think, 2019. But what they're proposing now is making sure that if the landlord is managing their properties on their own, that they're part of a redress scheme. If it's an agent doing the redress scheme or managing the property, then they will do the redress scheme. So it's basically the landlord hasn't got double jeopardy, i.e. have to be as a landlord and as having their properties managed in a PRS. It's one or the other. So that will be interesting to see what they do with that, and also whether it actually makes any sense and it has any benefit, really, because that's the whole point of doing these changes to any law. And it's also to give greater powers to drive improvements in standards. We're seeing that all the time in regards to agent standards with ROPA, standards in regards to tenant fee ban, fitness of human habitation. So there's a lot of drive from the government to make sure that the rental sector is properly looked after, that the people working within the sector are properly licensed via ROPA and or qualified to be able to do their job properly. And it also looks to empower tenants to make an informed choice about who they rent from, because at the moment, especially right at this very moment in time, there's not many properties available for rent. It's a huge problem for tenants being able to move, downsize, or just get into the rental sector. So they want to make the whole process a lot easier, and obviously make sure that from an expense point of view, it's not going up and up and up. And that was the whole point of the tenant fee ban, was to kind of take control of the finances and making sure that tenants weren't literally having to pay constantly to rent a property and unfairly, especially because at the time the fees were particularly high. So they're kind of like the Renters Reform Bill and what it's aiming to do. So lifetime deposits, what does that mean for us? So first of all, what is it? So lifetime deposits is about the movement of the deposit from A to B, from property to property with the tenant, and making it as a quick as possible transaction, and also from a financial point of view, making sure that the tenant isn't kind of like having a barrier to move in because of the deposit, and the fact that they can't move it either because it's either with the deposit scheme adjudicator because there's issues or disputes, or just the mere fact that a landlord won't take a tenant on without deposit. But obviously if their money is all held up in the first property, being able to release it to get to the second property becomes very, very difficult. And if you've then got to find that extra money, that extra cash on top of actually moving, then that's a huge amount of worry, huge amount of anxiety and financial risk, as it were, to the tenant to be able to actually do that. So the whole point of lifetime deposits is to make that transaction a lot smoother, easier, make the flow of movement within the property sector much easier, and just make it much fairer for everybody. What does that mean for inventory providers? Because a lot of people have said to me, well, got nothing to do with me, it has no impact on us at all. But in fact, it does. From my point of view, the big problem that with lifetime deposit is the fact that we're going to have a very quick flow of information. We're going to be able to need or have to get the checkout reports, the inventory reports, all kind of like funneling into maybe one specific system, or something that's either run by a software company or the government or even one of the schemes, where all the information feeds into one particular point so that the adjudicator can make a very quick and informed but fair decision. And the only way they're going to do that is by everything being virtual, everything being electronic, everything being attached to the actual rental and lettings process seamlessly. And the only way you can do that is digital. I can't see any other way of doing it. If it's paper-based, naturally and inherently, paper-based systems are very lengthy, very difficult. Items get lost. Whereas if it's tech-based, if we're plugged in via an open API, then the flow of information is much quicker. It means that we're not spending loads and loads of time waiting for things because everything is instant. For argument's sake, if you look at what InventoryBase does from an inventory reporting point of view, once you complete that report, that immediately goes off to any contacts you've got set up in the system, or you can share it immediately by the sharing button or share the PDF. So, the time taken to share all that information is very, very minimal. But if you can imagine the amount of information that would then be flowing into one particular area all at once in order to get a tenant through the lettings process and get them moved on to their next property, that's a lot of information. And then if you look at how many people are in the PRS, you're looking between 4.4 and 5.4 million, and they reckon that's going to go up to about 6 million in 2023, 2025. So that's a lot of information. And it's not just about the inventory. It's going to be the inventory, it's going to be check-in, it's going to be the interim, it's going to be the checkout. It's going to be all the other evidence that might be going forward in regards to what landlords might provide, agents might provide in regards to emails, receipts, work orders, that sort of thing. Anything to kind of like showcase exactly where maybe deductions need to be made, or from a tenant's point of view where things have been going wrong and they want to highlight that in a way to kind of evidence what the issues are at the property and maybe why the property is in the condition that it is at the point of checkout. But it's not just our bit of the sector, it's the whole tenancy process, right the way from the point of view, the point when a tenant starts that process, i.e. to look for a property, to say that, yes, I want that, put a deposit down or holding deposit down, and then start the actual process, and then all the paperwork that's generated involved, all of that's got to funnel into one place. So from that point of view, we've all got to be as quick and as seamless as possible in regards to information that we're putting in, but also information capture. Because I think the idea, and I'm saying I think because at the moment there's not enough information as it stands at the moment to formulate a bigger understanding, but I think it makes sense that if we are going to be feeding all of this into one place, in a very short period of time, everything has got to be very slick, very easy, because then has to go over to the adjudicator to make a decision, and then for the tenant then to be able to move to the next property and give that kind of like assurance to the landlord, so that where they're going to, that they will get their deposit, that the property will be indemnified, depending on what kind of deposit that forms, i.e. paper-based, or if it's insurance replacement product or if it's a cash type deposit. So for providers, it means we're going to have to be quick. It means we are going to have to make sure that we're in the property doing the reports, getting it over into the system. We're going to have a mechanism for doing that. And it's going to be a mechanism that we can all understand, all adhere to and be part of. And that then, again, says that it's got to be automated. From that point of view, we've got a lot of work to do in regards to getting those systems up and running. We still don't yet know who those people are going to be, what that system's going to look like, how it's all going to feed in. But what it does mean is that we are going to be seeing a quick transfer and flow of information, a rather quick pace. So we've got to engage in that. So we've got to be ready for that in regards to our own processes, in how we manage the reports and when we get them over to our clients, and also then who we then talk to. So that could be our systems and what we work with. From an InventoryBase point of view, that's not going to be particularly difficult because they've already got an open API. We already integrate with different systems. So the ability to actually talk to other systems is actually quite easy and something that we already do. But it does mean that we're going to have to look at those, but it also means we're going to have to look at the process in regards to the standardization, because I would imagine, and again, this is just my opinion, that what we will have is all this information going into the adjudicators, and what they don't want to do is to be trying to pick out, what does this mean? Is this in the right format? Can I understand it? Do I have everything that I need? So I can see a standardization then coming in regards to how the report is looking, how it's templated, the information it provides, and we might then see fixed fields, fixed information that the adjudicator wants in order to be able to do their job properly. And in a way, that's great. That's brilliant. That's kind of like what we've been after for a long, long time, because if we've got standards and we understand what it is that we're actually meant to be doing, then we've got a much better way of collating the information. And then hopefully then that means that information will be exactly what they need, and it will make the transaction even quicker. And if there are issues, they're going to be very evident and easy to manage. And from our point of view as providers, it will mean then we will have some guidance. We'll have some proper industry understanding of what everybody needs, rather at the moment we have a lot of grey area. We have a lot of, well, we think they need this, or we think that this would be a good idea for them to know it, especially in regards to health and safety, smoke alarms, certificates, manuals, and that sort of thing. But also down to the descriptions and the conditions and how the actions will need to be put in. If you look at the integration we have with the Depositary, all that's action-based, so that it's very clear for the system to pick up to say, okay, this is not clean, this is what needs to happen, this is damage, this is how much it's going to potentially cost in order to either repair, replace, or whatever needs to happen. So when you think about it, there's a whole body of information that needs to be dealt with and needs to be collated. InventoryBase is already kind of like doing that. We've been doing that as Academy. We've already been standardizing the templates, standardizing the information. Certainly on our training courses, we look at, what is the best evidence? What can we give the adjudicator to be able to understand what it is that they need to know, and then to make a fair decision, because they don't visit the property. They're never going to visit the property. So they only have what they've got in front of them. So certainly from the training perspective, when we're training clerks and putting down the standards from our point of view as an InventoryBase Academy, it means then we've already got those kind of things in place. But what we need to then understand is what the industry and what the government want. So that kind of leads me on to my third point, how it affects the supplier industry. I think it will be a positive step in some respects, because it will give those standardizations. We will have much more of an understanding of what it is the industry wants and needs. And then once you know that, then you can build around it and you can change your processes. But it will mean then potentially for some people, a lot of change. For others, not so much of a change. So if you're already using InventoryBase app, you're already connected to your clients, they've got their own accounts, the flow of information is already there. It's not going to be, I would imagine, particularly difficult. But if you're still using antiquated systems, pen and paper, or not to the level of detail that might be required, then you're going to have to make some changes. But we won't necessarily know that until we get more information. Certainly from the actual industry itself, then there will be a lot of changes, because the government and all the bodies that are involved, Property Mark, National Residential Landlords Association, and other interested parties, all going to be looking at, what do they need to do? And also the actual point of moving a deposit from one place to another. It can be a transaction no different to a bank. But the problem they've got is then how do they indemnify the difference between the first deposit and the second deposit if there's deductions either been made or likely to be made but not yet been adjudicated on? Who then makes that decision, and also then what does that look like from a financial point of view? Because quite rightly, landlords won't want to have a tenant moving into their property without the benefit of that deposit or some kind of bond or some way of indemnifying, ensuring the difference between the two. Otherwise, the landlord's putting their property at risk, and that's perfectly understandable. And equally, tenant wants to move, but they're hindered or held back either through a deduction that they either agree or don't agree with. So I can see the industry having to deal with that. And I know certainly from, I can't remember if it was NALA or Property Mark, they were talking about a bond, a way of kind of like indemnifying the difference between the two payments. So for argument's sake, the first deposit's £1,000, same on the other end, but there's a £500 deduction. That £500 has got in some way got to be paid for or indemnified or insured or bonded in some way, shape or form. Some are saying it should be the government. It could be the tenant's got to stump that up. And then does that solve the problem of porting the deposit, because there's still a sum of money that's got to be found? So you can see there's a huge amount of issues still to come up, but I don't think it's insurmountable. I don't think it's going to be particularly difficult if you've got the right mindset, but we've got to think of all the different potential eventualities that might come from this, and also make sure we look at the barriers. Tech from a point of view of, everybody feeding in, where's it going to feed into, how quickly it's going to be done, how automated can we make it so it makes it seem as possible. Now, are we going to be looking at a timeline? So for argument's sake, 10 days, will that be working days or just 10 days straight from the calendar? And what happens if things go wrong? There's going to have to be a body that's going to be looking at that, because obviously adjudicators really can't deal with that. The adjudicator's job is to look at the potential deductions. Their job is to look at the differences between the inventory checkout, working out who's at fault potentially, who's going to pay what, and then deal with that. So that needs to be a separate body to deal with that. And could that sit with, the PRS scheme? Possibly, but again, their role is to mediate. So I think this is more of a process issue. So this is why we need a lot of direction from the government. And the government are going to be issuing a white paper. Now, they're saying by the end of autumn, but the parliamentary year actually finishes, I think, in March next year, so 2022. So it could be any time between now and then. And it's only a white paper at that point, and then it's got to be consulted on. Then we've got to feed into it and also then start the process of working out exactly how it's actually going to work, and then what software we're going to be using, because we will need software. I've got no doubt at all with that. Again, that's not going to be a problem for InventoryBase. I'm sure it's not going to be a problem for a lot of the other apps, but at the end of the day, the system's going to have to manage all these different people, all these different apps and APIs all feeding into one space, and then going to be able to deal with that and put it out to where it needs to go, i.e. the deposit adjudicators and or to the next landlord, to then make the next step and allow the tenant to make that next step onto the property ladder, as it were, in the rental market. So we've still got a long way to go until we get to that point. But I think it's worthwhile us as inventory providers thinking about it now, thinking about our processes, thinking about what we can do to utilise the InventoryBase system as best as possible, looking at actions, looking to ensure that we've got all the best possible evidence that we can think of right at this moment in time until we get that direction. And then once we have that direction, then we can then start moving forward. But I think also it's incumbent on us as providers that we don't get dictated to, that we feed into the process and use every ability that we have in order to talk to the various people involved, MHCLG with the government, any of the other trade bodies, PRS, Property Mark, and feed into that so that our voice gets heard, that we don't end up being dictated to. We are part of the solution, as opposed to someone just feeding into it and just being arbitrarily told, well, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And obviously any costs that may come with that, because until the systems are dealt with and we understand what they're going to look like, there's a potential cost to us. That could be financial, it could be time. So we just got to look at that and make sure that we use every opportunity to feed into that. Certainly from my own point of view, from InventoryBase Academy, from what I'm doing, talking to as many people as will listen and that will engage, that I want to represent as much as I can inventory providers Doesn't matter whether you're inventory based or not, it doesn't make any difference. At the end of the day, we're all clerks, we're all part of the service industry. So I want to make sure that we're represented and that, you know, what we need and what we need to understand, how we're going to implement things, and also then what the effects will be on us and how we manage those effects are all taken into account, so that we are part of that conversation. So as I always say to everybody that I ever talk to when I'm training, you know, look at what's happening in the industry, look out for all these changes, look out for the white paper. I will be talking about it and blogging about it as I understand it. And as it becomes known, and get engaged, you know, talk, and, you know, let me know, let your representatives know of your trade body or whoever it is that you deal with, so that they understand what your needs are and hopefully they take those into account. So that's the lifetime deposits as I understand it at the moment. It'd be great to get your understanding, and also if you've got any queries or questions, then do feel free to contact me. Our website is academy.inventorybase.com. Email address is sian@inventorybase.com. So do feel free to email me if you'd like, or you can call me at InventoryBase, which is 0333 444 506. I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on also the Facebook hub as well. So do feel free to DM me. Great to continue the talk in person, and hopefully we will see some positive changes that we're all part of. Thank you very much for listening, and look forward to talking to you again here at InventoryBase Academy.